probably 20 people get shot. Probably about 30, 40 people that we knew were dead. From living there for over 20 years, we'd seen a lot of stuff.
Tracy, nice to have you on.
Thank you very much.
So we'll start at the beginning. Okay. So you could just tell us, where are you from? How was it in your early childhood? Okay. And those just genesis moments of your life.
Okay. So my name is Tracy. I grew up right outside of Washington, D.C. in Oxon Hill, Maryland. I was born in 1967. My father was 19 and my mother was 18. My mother abandoned me when I was a little over a year old, and my father didn't really want any children, so he reminded me of that every single day. Later on, I found out that my mother had had 3 children by the time I was born, and one was by her father. So I think she left me because she didn't want that life for me. And I think she had the best intentions for me, but it took a long time for me to come to that realization. So my father remarried another woman, and I just instinctively knew at like maybe 6 or 7 that something wasn't right in our family. So it was my mom, my dad, my stepmom, my dad, little sister, and me. And I was the bad child. I was the one who didn't have any toys. I was the one who didn't have any books or pretty fluffy animals or nothing. So I was about 7 years old when my stepmother told me that she wasn't my mother, and that my mother didn't want me. And I was bad, and I got beat a lot, and she kept me in the basement. My father was a firefighter who worked and was gone about 3 or 4 days a week. So during that time, she kept me in the basement, and she beat me every day. And I was always told I was bad, and I believed that. I always thought I wasn't, sorry. I always thought I wasn't good enough.
If you need something, I got you. Give me 1 second. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I didn't know that was going to happen.
Yeah, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay, so so my dad, when I was about 9, in the middle of the night, my dad put me in the car and drove me to Pennsylvania to stay with my grandmother. So I couldn't say goodbye to my friends or anything. And then one day I was in school, and my dad showed up, picked me up, and took me out of Pennsylvania and brought me back to Maryland. And right away I learned that I felt like relationships weren't important because I was just taken away from my friends and my little boyfriend and stuff like that, and I couldn't say goodbye, and so I struggled with relationships after that for a long time. And then within a year or 2, he gave me to the state of Maryland, and they put me in a wilderness school in the mountains of Shenandoah, which I actually liked because I learned how to camp and how to make fires, and we went on trips and canoeing, and I really liked it. And then one day they just told me I was leaving, and again I was just taken away and sent back to my dad. And I tried to be really good. I was a straight A student. I was on the honor roll. I went to school and didn't do anything wrong. But if anything happened, I would get beat. I mean, anything. If I didn't wash the dishes, or if I didn't do something, I would get, beat badly.
Was this when you went back with your father? Is he still with the stepmother?
No, it was just me and him.
So it was.
They had gotten a divorce.
Got you. So you were experiencing that abuse with your stepmother
And my dad.
and your dad.
Yeah.
When it was just with him.
Yeah.
Got you. Okay. Okay.
And then on my 16th birthday, my dad gave me a card and said, you know, I can't wait till you're able to take care of yourself so I don't have to see you anymore. And so I left. And I moved down the street to a neighbor's house. And they told me I could stay there for free if I went to school. Or if I wanted to get a job and get my GED, I had to pay like $25 a week. So I quit school and I went to work. And so I learned how to take care of myself. And I told myself that I would never let anybody hit me again. But what I did was I started abusing myself because I didn't think I was good enough. So in small ways, I just didn't take care of myself very well. Anyway, I got into a relationship. I got pregnant at 18. And I said, I'm going to get my GED. I got my GED, and then I applied for the federal government. And this guy, my daughter's father, used to call me dummy. And he used to say I was stupid and dumb and put me down all the time. And when I took the civil service test, I had several options of what department I wanted to work for in the government because I scored like 97%. And people in the government told me I was really smart. So they started sending me to college classes. And I started learning a whole lot, and it was the first time I really felt good about myself, but I was living two different lives because my life at home was abusive, more verbally and psychologically and emotionally, and I knew I didn't know how to take care of my daughter, but I knew I didn't want to hurt her. And I didn't want to beat her. And so I didn't know how to take care of a kid or how to love a kid. So one night I met this girl who lived around the corner, and I was at her house and just hanging out, just me and her, and we were drinking, and I passed out, and the next thing I knew, my daughter's father was yanking me out of the house and drugged me all the way down the street and was screaming and yelling, and I called the police. They kept me in the hospital. I was just bruised from head to toe, and they thought I got hit by a car. They didn't know what had happened. And that's the day that I left. And I left my daughter there because his parents, we were living with his parents, and his parents, she was a school teacher, and his father was a business owner, and they were good people, and I knew that they wouldn't keep her from me, and I knew that that would be a safe environment for her. Even though he was there, he wouldn't do that to her. So I left, and then eventually I left the federal government because I had to change jobs, and I wasn't real good with change. So after about 6 years, I left the government, and I went into private industry, and I started being like an office manager. And all of my friends were guys, and they were all in construction, so I started learning about construction projects and started working for construction companies. And then I got into another relationship with, I thought, the love of my life. And I was so happy, and he treated me so good, but I didn't know how to be in a relationship. I didn't know how to treat people. I didn't know that if you weren't putting me down or hitting me, that I didn't think you loved me. It was really messed up. So I kind of messed that relationship up, but we stayed together almost 30 years, and it just got really bad in the end, and yeah, he broke my heart, but that was about 3 or 4 years ago I left, and I lived in Baltimore City, and can we stop for a second?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't know. I'm just rambling.
No, you're fine.
Sorry.
You're fine. We could pick back up when you're ready, and I can
Sorry.
Yeah, you're fine. You want water?
No, all right. Sorry.
That's all right.
So 3 years ago, I left Baltimore City. I was in a relationship for about 28 years with a person I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with. But a lot of things had happened. In 2020, I got stabbed from behind by somebody who thought I was somebody else, and I had to have a major operation, and the person had no remorse. And in the city that I lived, in the part of the city I lived in, there were a lot of drug dealers, and I was always in the street because I didn't have a family, so I always thought the streets were my family somehow. So I kind of had to ask permission if I could press charges, and everybody was upset that this person actually could have killed me. And so I pressed charges, and she went to jail for 10 years. And I didn't have any worry or fear in my life. I was on my own since I was about 16, and I've never been put in a situation to where I was in danger. I was always around guys, but never had any assaults or anything bad happened to me. I always treated people good, and so I could walk around the streets anywhere, and I always felt comfortable. I was a very confident person. I was kind of a tomboy, kind of a badass. Until that happened, I started getting afraid to go outside, and I started having panic attacks and anxiety issues, and I had never had that before. And so I went to the doctor, and I was diagnosed with PTSD. And they started putting me on a lot of medication. And because I had an operation and was having a lot of health problems, I got put on a lot of pain pills, which led to an addiction problem. I had always done drugs, smoked pot, did some acid, drank a little bit, but I was never really, a drug addict until I got on pain pills. And being in Baltimore City, I quickly turned to heroin. And that started a whole nightmare for me. Thank God I was only on it for a few years. But my partner was also doing it, and that caused a lot of problems. And one day I just said I didn't want that life anymore. And right before the pandemic, I went to rehab, and they didn't have a detox program. So I had to detox cold turkey, and there was no heroin in the heroin. It was fentanyl and morphine, and it took 19 days for me to detox. And everybody in the rehab were placing bets that I wouldn't make it, but I did it because I knew I was done. And one day, the first day that I felt good, probably about 21 days into my detox, I realized that what I had done for myself showed me that I really did love myself. And I was probably about 55, 54 by then. And I had lived my whole life looking for love, looking for a family, looking for somebody to tell me I was good enough, because I was raised to believe that I was not wanted, not loved, and not good enough. And I believed all those things for a long, long time. And so I got my act together. I went back home to the man, and nothing had changed. But I knew that if I had stayed in Baltimore, I was going to die, because I was doing that every day. Every day I was playing Russian roulette.
Was there a moment, do you remember the moment when you first were just like, I'm done, I'm cutting this cold turkey?
I was in the middle of Baltimore. I lived in Highlandtown in the worst part of Baltimore City, and it was raining. It was probably about 1 o'clock in the morning. I was sick. I was trying to find some dope. And I went to get some dope, and I was coming back, and I just said, there's nobody here that loves me. I'm in a place where nobody loves me, nobody cares. And my partner said, when I said, I'm leaving tomorrow to go to rehab, he said, oh, you're going to rehab again? What's this, like the 500th time you've gone? And I said, yeah, but it just hit me that means that I have hope, that I desperately wanted to be clean. But it's a scary place when you think you're not worth it, and you're going to lose everybody around you, because if you want to be clean, you can't be around them people. And I didn't know where it was going to lead me, but I knew I just wanted somebody to love me. And fortunately, I had a child with a guy 30 plus years ago, and his family immediately, when I moved in, and I was like 16 or 17, and the cousins, the aunties, everybody just embraced me as family, had always considered me as family. And so they were my daughter's grandparents, and so I went there for the weekend, and I begged my grandmother, or, well, grandma, that's what we call her, to let me come there and stay, because if I went back to Baltimore, I was going to die, because I knew I would use again. And man, that was the best thing for me. It was hard because I would have stayed with this guy forever.
Is this the guy that you were with for 30 years?
28 years I was with him.
28 years, yeah.
And, you know, I had a way of not looking at the truth and looking at the fantasy life that I thought I was living. You know, I thought I was madly in love and this was going to be forever. And once I got out of it and I saw that it wasn't that for a long time. But, you know, if I left, I was going to lose everything. I was going to lose my home and my love and my furniture and, like, everything. But when I got clean, I didn't want any of that stuff. None of it mattered to me. I took the clothes on my back. I packed a duffel bag and a suitcase, and I left everything. And I gave myself a chance to start my life again. Yeah. I hadn't had a job in years because I was running the streets and I was hustling and I was running drugs and doing all this stuff for people. And is this the time, because we did get ahead a little bit, is this the time where, like... This is like 2015 to 2020.
Okay.
that I was in the streets in Baltimore. I moved to Baltimore in 2002. In 1999, I was living in Montgomery County, and I always kind of stayed in the street, ran around drug dealers and stuff, and because I made money doing that, and I got free drugs. So in 1999, I was running these guys to D.C. They would get their drugs in D.C. and bring them back to Montgomery County. Not big time stuff, like a couple of ounces of coke and weed and stuff like that. And I would make some money and get some drugs for free, and I didn't see any harm in it. And then one day, 4 guys in suits came knocking on my door, and they were the organized crime unit of the Montgomery County Police Department. And I was caught in a undercover operation that they were doing on 16th Street in D.C. They thought I was part of that. And so they had tapped my phone. They had pictures of me going in and out of different places, and they thought I was wrapped up in this undercover investigation, but I wasn't. I didn't know anything about it, but they didn't believe me. But they told me, that they were watching me and I didn't have to worry about anything, just keep doing what I'm doing. And so I wasn't really sure what I was involved in because I didn't know anything, and I knew it didn't have anything to do with the people I was dealing with in Montgomery County, so I didn't see any harm in it. And then one day I got a phone call and they told me to stop doing what I was doing and stop going to make these drug runs. So I stopped. This was in like October of 1999. Then in February of 2000, they called and wanted me to make a run. And I was making about $500 a run, and I needed that money. And it was a snowstorm. It was February 3rd of 2001 or 2000, I can't remember. But I figured it was 5 months later. They're not still watching me. So I took the chance, and as soon as I crossed the D.C. line, they pulled me over.
So they were like surveilling you?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I had $7,000 worth of crack in my car, and I had a guy with me, and he stashed everything in the car. So there was a gun, $7,000 worth of crack. I had a triple beam scale in my trunk. And when they pulled me over, the guy goes, they were in uniform, and I didn't recognize anybody. And the guy goes, "Didn't I tell you not to make that run?" And I knew right then I was in a lot of trouble. So I went to jail, and my daughter's grandparents came to bail me out. My bail was like $30,000 or something. They came down there with $3,000 or whatever, and the bail bondsman wouldn't bail me out. They said that the judge, even though I had a bail, I wasn't to be bailed out. So I knew that something wasn't good. So I got a public defender, and then it just so happened that the roll of the dice, the public defender I got was actually law firms have to do so many pro bono cases for the state, so I got a real lawyer, and I had a 35-page indictment. So they indicted me on every run, every transaction. I was facing 100 years in prison. But when I told her that they had came to my house and all of this had happened, it came out that there was this ATF, it was ATF, DC Police, and Montgomery County Police in a joint operation surveilling the 16th Street gang. And they thought I was in on the gang, and I wasn't. So they rolled the dice and thought I was going to be the one that helped them nab this drug ring. And so the whole operation fell apart. So they were going to put me in prison for it. But my lawyer, thank God, saw right through it. The judge, she had gone to the judge, that's why they kept me in jail, was to protect me, but I didn't know that because they weren't sure if I was going to get killed from the 16th Street people or the police or Montgomery County or, who was after me. So it was just better for me to stay in jail.
How long did you end up doing?
So I got sentenced, oh man, that was a bad day. September 21st, 2001. I was sentenced to 24 years in prison.
24 years?
Yeah. The judge said, I'm going to help you save your life. He said, I'm going to sentence you to 24 years in prison. But I will reconsider the sentence if you can get this girl in the program and get her out of Montgomery County. And so I went to jail. And wow. When I got my papers in jail, they give you like your papers and what you've been found guilty of and your release date. And my release date were all zeros. Ooh, Lord. And I had never been to jail. I didn't know when I was getting out. I didn't know what was going on. So I stayed in jail for about 5 or 6 months. And then one day they said, we're going to put you in a program out in Crownsville, Maryland. And so they sent me this program called Second Genesis.
I don't want to get too far. So in that 5 to 6 months, how was that experience?
In jail?
Being someone that never been to jail
well,
and just getting thrust into that.
I was on suicide watch because I went into shock when I was sentenced. And so my lawyer thought it was best for them to put me on suicide watch. And so I got lucky because every day I was in 7 Locks, which is a jail in Montgomery County. And every day I would have to go downstairs to a nurse who would give me some kind of medicine that would make me feel better and let me sleep. And every day I would come down the elevator and there was this guy and he always told me, pick your head up, pick your head up. It's going to be all right. And one day I listened to him and I picked my head up. And he said, I'm going to help you out. His name was Sonny. And he was like a trustee. And so he had set me up with bags and bags of canteen and which was like soup and cakes and snacks and underwear and radios and all kinds of stuff that people buy on commissary. And he said, you can use this to, make your way through. You'll figure it out. And then he gave me a list of different medications. When people come in, you send them down to the nurse, you get these pills, and people will do transactions for these pills. And then he got me a trustee position. So I was running mail from the men's side to the women's side as a trustee. None of the COs messed with me. I had my own cell. He had set me up so good that nobody messed with me because I had everything and they wanted it. And so, yeah, that guy, I don't know. He just, like I said, I've had angels in my life watching me for sure.
I can imagine it made the jail time go by a little bit smoother.
Yeah, and just the fact that you think jail and like, are they going to rape me? Like, what? That's the first thing. Mm-hmm. That was the first thing I asked. Like I was terrified. Mm-hmm. But I had been locked up as a juvenile. My dad had given me to the state when I was about 13 or 14. I was supposed to stay in until I was 18, and then something had happened, and I got released right before I turned 16 back to my dad. My dad never wanted me, and he beat me all the time, and it was just awful.
You got released back to your dad?
When I was a juvenile.
When you was a juvenile, gotcha.
Yeah, so I had been locked up before, but
yeah.
Not in any kind of jail system as an adult. And again, I didn't know when I was getting out. I didn't know if I had to do, 16 years or 24, or I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
So I had been in there about 5 or 6 months. They let me out to a program called Second Genesis. I was there for about 2 weeks, and one of the counselors pinned me up against the wall and tried to assault me. And
Physically,
physically,
sexually?
yeah, I mean, he tried sexually, but I fought him back.
Wow.
And,
Yeah.
and it was like an overnight counselor. And so when I fought him back, he just told me to go to my room. And I was afraid to say anything because I didn't know if they were going to put me back in jail. So for about 2 or 3 days, I didn't say anything, and I didn't see him come back to work. And then I found out that night he had quit, the night he assaulted me. He never came back. So about 3 days later, I told what he had done. And so they took me out of that program, and they sent me to a place called the Chrysalis House, which was an all-women's program in Baltimore City. And it was a dual diagnosis place, like for people that are bipolar and have drug issues. I was never a drug addict, but I did drugs. But it was just a program that the court would take instead of a prison sentence. So it was a year-long program, and it was all women, which I never really dealt with women before, so it was a whole new thing for me, and it ended up to be a wonderful program. And I got really good friends being with these women that, it was hard being around women like that, but it was better than being with the women in jail. Anything was better than jail. So that's how I got into Baltimore City. I couldn't go back to Montgomery County, and I wasn't really sure if anybody was looking for me or trying to hurt me, or I didn't, I had gotten caught up in the drug thing, and I didn't know what was going to happen. So it was just better for me not to go to Montgomery County. So that's how I ended up in Baltimore, and then my partner moved out there. And so...
You met him in Baltimore?
No, I've known him since we were kids, like 16 or so.
Gotcha.
And we had been together. He was with me through this whole time, but I never got him caught up in any of the illegal shit that I was doing. He never knew really what was going on until I had a court date. But and so he moved out there with me, and I was we were doing really good, and I was a counselor for homeless people with AIDS, because I thought I wanted to be a counselor after being around counselors, and I kind of liked helping people. I've always been pretty kind to people, but I thought that's where my life was going to go, but I invested too much into them. And so when they failed, it hurt me, and I was, it was too personal for me. It wasn't good for me to be a counselor. But I stayed employed, and I stayed out of trouble. I had 10 years probation because in the midst of all this, I had stolen about $30,000 from my job. So I had 10 years to pay that money back. And when I moved to Baltimore City, and they saw that the case that I beat in Montgomery County, the judge was like, I don't know how you're not in prison for decades, but if you come in here and violate this, and I know you will, there's no way you're going to do 10 years of probation and not violate. I will put you back in jail, and you will do all the backup time, which was about 23 years. Her name was Catherine O'Malley, and she was a very tough judge. Every month I had to go to court, and I had to pay restitution. I did 10 years. I paid every dime of it back, and I never violated. And she congratulated me and said she would have lost the family farm betting that I would definitely be back in her courtroom with other charges. But one time in jail was enough for me. I was done with the criminal life. So when I got to Baltimore City, everything was good for a couple of years, and then, you know, we started dabbling in drugs here and there on the weekends, and, you know, neither one of us really had, you know, addiction problems. We always had a house and cars and jobs, and, you know, but we just kind of did things here and there. But, you know, my self-esteem and my confidence, and I didn't have any. And I didn't, because I had been brought up to believe, you know, nobody wanted me and nobody, you know, I was never going to be good enough. I believed all that for years. And I didn't know how to be in relationships. Even with friends, you know, I would just disappear. I would just end it. And I hurt a lot of people. And I didn't know that I was important to them. I just didn't know that. I thought, you know, I didn't realize that I had value to them. For years, I didn't know that. It just seemed like I was always looking for love from people. And the people that loved me, it just didn't feel like they loved me. So again, I was out in the streets. You know, I wasn't committing any major crimes or anything, but, you know, I just liked being in the streets. I liked all the drama. I liked.
Was that more?
Sorry.
Would you say that was like more? Because I'm thinking about it in my head as you explain it. It's like, because I've dealt with that in the sense where I would disappear on folks, push them away from me,
Yeah.
and in hindsight, like I'll look at it like 5-6 years later, and I'll think in my head like, oh, these were actually good people.
Yeah.
I
didn't see that my value to them.
To them, yeah. I was in my head too much, thinking like, oh, they probably view me as this.
And the further and the more I pushed you, showed me that you loved me. If you didn't leave, and sometimes if you hit me, then I knew that you loved me.
Wow.
It was weird,
Wow.
you know, because I can remember 2 times that my dad told me he loved me.
Mm-hmm.
And one time I was probably I think I was in 8th grade, and he had, I was getting ready to go to school, and my dad had just come home from the night shift, and there was a letter from the school, and he came and he said, "Do you want to tell me about this before I open it?" And I was like, I don't know what it is. And he smacked me across the face. And then he opened the letter, and it was, I made the honor roll. And so he told me he loved me. And so in my head, that's what love was.
That contrast is, I could see from a psychological perspective how that will skew someone's brain into thinking this is what love is. Mm-hmm. Because if I was to look at that like a movie scene, and an 8-year-old comes through the door, comes home, and she has something in the mail, and her father's already thinking this must be a suspension, this must be this.
What'd you do wrong?
What'd you do wrong? Bad. So before I even open this, I'm going to smack you.
Because he thought I was lying about
what it is. So then, the arc of it that makes it so perplexing is that he opens it up, sees that, oh, my daughter has made honor roll, and now has to immediately scramble in his brain and say, oh, I just, effed up. I just hit her, and she did something good. I was a child before. We all were children before. That will confuse me. That will like so deeply confuse me that so I can understand this, what I'm saying.
Because
I can understand.
It didn't matter if I was good or not. I still got beat. It didn't matter what I did. It could be the smallest thing. I could fall down and get, dirt on my pants before we're going to church. And I would get beat with an extension cords. I mean, beat. I was beat so bad that they sent me home from school because the welts on the back of my legs were bleeding. And then, so when I turned 16, and my dad said, I can't wait till you're almost old enough to take care of yourself. that's when I left because I was old. I figured I could do better. I mean, I couldn't be hit. I was 16 years old, and you want me to pull my pants down so you can beat me with a belt. I mean, it just didn't make sense to me anymore.
From there, where'd you go when you decided to leave his house?
I went right down the street to the neighbors because I grew up, I was in and out of the same neighborhood my whole life. Mm-hmm. And so they knew me ever since I was a kid. And so they let me stay in their house. And then I went to my daughter's father's house, which is all in the same neighborhood. Mm.
How many years how many months or years did you, I'm trying to paint it in my head. So there was a time where you just left your father, you went over to a friend's house.
Yeah, probably about a year I stayed in that house.
How was that, staying there?
And then my daughter's father was 6 years older than me, so I was like 17 and he was 24. So he knew how to bring me in, how to rein me in, because they lived in a nice house. He lived with his parents, and he did. I saw it once I looked at it. He didn't work, but he always had money, and he had nice things. But that's because his parents were providing that for him, not because it was him. But then, I moved into his house because he said I could move in, and then, I ended up getting pregnant, and now I'm trapped. And, and then his mother, thank God, told me, go take the civil service test, which is the test you take to get a government job. Mm-hmm. And then the phone was just ringing. And, I had my choice of all these jobs because I scored so high on the test. Gotcha. And then I went to the Department of Commerce. I got a really good boss who started sending me to classes. And I used to get so mad because I didn't want to go to class. I wanted to stay in the office with everybody. And then my girlfriend, Tanya, who was a very, very good friend to me, and she's one that I just kind of walked away from and broke her heart. And Anyway, but she told me, these classes are to help you, educate you. This is like really good for you to learn this. I was learning how to write and how to, I was writing handbooks and manuals, and I was, typing and, doing all this stuff that, I didn't even know how to work a fax machine when I started working there. So I was, it was just all learning. And I had stayed in that office for about 6 years, and I was maxed out. So I had to get my promotion. I had to leave the office and go to another job. And I didn't want to do that. And so I quit. I just left the government. But I went into private sector, and the government, I didn't make any money. And in private sector, I could walk in. I was getting hired right on the spot, making $30,000, $40,000 when I was making $18,000 in the government. So to me, I was flying high, and I was smart. Look at me, and thought I was all this and that. But like I said, even when you leave the abuser, when you're abused, sometimes that you become the abuser to yourself. I see it the way I treated friendships and how I walked away from people because, I was just pulled out of so many situations and moved here, and you're going to live here, and now you're going to the state, and then you're going to jail, and now you're going to live here. And so I saw it as an adult. Now I see it, and but at the time I just didn't think, that these people had any need for me or that I mattered to them. I just thought, all right, I'll just gone. And then I saw Tanya years later, and she was like, I cried like I lost a man, like I was crying, I was hurt. And I was shocked. I just couldn't believe that I meant that much to you. It floored me. I didn't know that because no one had ever told me I had any value. It was wild. It was a wild ride. But
are you and Tanya in contact now?
I just recently reached out to her a couple of months ago, and I think, she's a little hesitant, but I apologized to her and told her, exactly that I didn't know
Gotcha.
You know, I didn't know any better. And I wish I hadn't have done that, because she's a good one. You know,
Yeah,
she's a good one.
yeah.
Also, like in 2020, when I got clean, my girlfriend, I had met this girl in 2016 in Baltimore City, and her name was Robin, and we were complete opposites. But we were just soul sisters. I mean, that was my girl. We were so close, best friends, never had an argument. And Robin had gone off to get clean, and she was clean about 2 years, and I hadn't seen her in 2 years, and one day she knocked on the door, and she was there, and I was so happy to see her, but at the same time I told her I didn't want to see her again here, because I knew if she came back she was going to start using again, and I knew she had a better life, and she had moved to Columbia, and what had happened, she got a car and she drove right back to the neighborhood, and I had done that 1,000 times, and I told her I wasn't going to let that happen to her. And that was on a Sunday, and then Tuesday she called and said opened the door, and she was at my house, and I was mad because I could already see where this was going. But she walked in the house, and I went upstairs. I was just watching the news or something in my room, and she came upstairs and she sat down on the floor, and I was irritated because she was there. I didn't say 2 words to her, and I was looking at the TV, and then I looked over, and she was dead.
Was this like an overdose?
Yeah, she had come back around. She had gone down the street, and she bought some crack. From what I could put together, she bought some crack, and the guy that she bought the crack from said that as soon as she took the hit, she wasn't acting right, and he told her, to get out of there, because he didn't want her right there with, just like a police substation right there. So I guess she came to my house, and from what I understood, she had a heart attack, and but I didn't know what she had done. She just wasn't responding, and I had Narcan, and the fire department came, and they worked on her for like 45 minutes, and I was doing CPR, and so they kept her alive for a couple of days, and she donated her organs, and so when I called her daughter, they thought I was lying, and they thought, she had OD'd, but that's not what happened. So that was in January, and then, that July was when I had enough.
Yeah.
I was done, because in Baltimore City, I had seen probably 20 people get shot. Probably about 30, 40 people that we knew were dead. From living there for over 20 years, we'd seen a lot of stuff, and I just couldn't take it anymore.
Would you say Baltimore was like the roughest
Oh
experience?
yeah, Baltimore was bad in the 2000s. I moved there in 2002, and then I left in 2020. Yeah. So there was kids on our block that were they didn't even live. They didn't even live. I mean 20 years old, they were dead. They never left Baltimore. They've never seen the ocean. They've never lived a life. It was just too much. It was just too much. Literally every person. I think there's about 3 people left that are still alive that have been there since I moved there. All these, at least 30 people that we knew are dead. Drug dealers, in the game, and because we were right in the middle of it, and we didn't know that. It was a lot cheaper to live in Baltimore than it was in D.C. Jesus, we had a huge house. It was like $800 a month. You know, in D.C., we'd rent a room for, you know, $800 a month. So it was, you know, it was. I loved Baltimore in one aspect, and then maybe because I was getting older and I was just tired of it, it got to the point where I just wanted out, and yeah, I was just done. And then, you know, that's when I went to my daughter's grandmother and said, you know, I'm done. I'm gonna die if I go back there, because I knew enough when I had gotten clean, and and what I had done is when I went into rehab, the pandemic happened. So I was literally stayed in rehab for a year because we were in lockdown. So when I went back to the partner, you know, he was still doing the same thing, and it was just, you know, you're stealing my shit, and I'm not even on it anymore. Like, you know, it was just, I was done. And because I had been away from him, and I saw the betrayal, and I saw what the relationship really was, and I wasn't living in this pretend love story that it wasn't. I wasn't the love of his life. Even though he was the love of mine, I would have stayed with him forever. But I saw the resentment and the anger and this hatred that he had towards me. Like, but I didn't do him wrong. I always protected him. You know, I was in the streets. He went to work. But, you know, I was bringing it in too. You know, I was contributing to the house too. I mean, you know, and then for him to turn it all around and say, you know, he took care of me for all these years, and it was just all bullshit. And so, but I don't have all this anger or resentment. Well, I don't regret my relationship. I just wish we could have, you know, seen the value of it. You know, I guess I don't have any value for him, but I'm okay with that today because I see my value. And it took such a long time for me to see that, you know, it's not about, you know, when you don't have a home, when you don't have a family. Because when I left my dad, I never went back. I never talked to my family anymore. None of them, except for my father's mother, my grandmother, because she was always honest with me. But my dad told me so many lies about my real mother. He wouldn't tell me her name. He lied that she was dead. He told all these stories, and then like it was like they were all lying to me. And then when I told them, you know, about what my stepmother had done to me, and, you know, my dad was like, oh, you know, I didn't know all that was going on. Bullshit. Everybody knew. Everybody knew that what she was, they might not have known the extent of what she was doing, but the neighbors knew. Because, you know, like I said, he had took me in the middle of the night and took me to Pennsylvania, and I was up there for 3 years. When I came back to the neighborhood, people thought she had killed me because I just disappeared, and they didn't mention me anymore. But, you know, this was like in the 70s, and you didn't talk about what went on in other people's houses. I don't even think there was a Child Protective Services back then. You know, I mean, but I know quite a few neighbors have said, you know, I'm so sorry that we didn't say anything. Like, they knew, everybody knew that they could hear me screaming. I was eating dog food.
She was feeding you food?
She wouldn't feed me. She would give me a piece of bread and then come over there with pepper and pour it all over there. I wasn't the kid that could come in the house and open the refrigerator. Oh no. She put my hand over a fire because I went in the refrigerator and got some juice without asking, and then made me drink gasoline.
Oh, she was tormenting you?
Yeah. She
Wow.
hated me. She told me that at 7 years old, that she hated me. And that everybody hated me. Nobody wanted me. And that's how it felt. Because it always felt like, where was Tracy good? Where are we going to put Tracy? And, you know, it just, I never had a home. You know, I was just taken from here to there and go. And then when my dad told me one day, oh, we're not going to school today, I need to take you somewhere. And I'm in a courtroom at 13, and he gives me to the state. Yeah.
Where is your real mom at this time?
I have no idea. I've never seen my real mother. I can't find her. I don't know anything about her. But I was able to piece together a little bit of the stories that my father told me, and my father had told me that I think what had happened was she got pregnant, and so my grandmother, because we're Catholic and Irish, probably made my dad marry her because she was pregnant with me. My dad had told me one time that when he went to talk to her parents and ask could he marry her, there was a little boy there, and she tried to tell my dad that that was her brother. But my dad said he just kind of knew that that was her son. When I finally got my birth certificate, there's like two different kinds of birth certificates. One is a little bit more detailed than the other. Mm-hmm. That's when I found out her name, where she was from. And then I realized when it says like how many births and how many children and all that other stuff, that I was her third child and she was 18. Mm-hmm. And if that little boy was 8 years old and she was 18, so she had that kid at, 10, 12. 11, So I was looking for her for a long time, and something told me you might not want to find what you're looking for. You might not want to know what you're looking for. It might not be like it. If it was meant to be, I think she would have found me by now. Or, I kind of stepped away from it when I had my daughter, and I saw what I went through with my daughter's father. Mm-hmm. That's when I kind of said, okay, I don't know the story, I don't know the truth, but maybe I think I know enough to know that she did that because of her love for me. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. If she was living that kind of life, then she sure didn't need to have me tag along with her, because she had her own issues.
So she felt probably. No, I'm sorry for cutting you off. I hate doing that. But she probably felt like, okay, the man that I had the child with, he could probably add more structure than I can right now.
Oh,
because
100%.
You did the math, and it's like, okay, technically that means you would have had to have a kid like at 11, 12.
Yeah. And
now you're having me at 18. You're probably in no condition.
And I'm your third kid, so I don't know where the second kid is.
Okay.
So I kind of pieced together that, like I said, I've never been sexually assaulted, thank God. Nothing like that. I've never been in a situation like that. I mean, the second Genesis thing, but he didn't do anything to me. Mm-hmm. But
he couldn't get that far because of you fighting back and things like that.
Yeah. But I think she was saving me from that because, and I think that's I'm kind of a very spiritual person, and I kind of believe that wasn't put into my life because I don't think I could have handled that. Mm-hmm. And I think that was her life. My life had its own issues, you know what I mean? That on top of all that would have really screwed me up. But I just think that she did the best that she could do, gotcha. Because when she left me, when she abandoned me, she was in an apartment with just me and her. My dad, they had already split. Mm-hmm. My dad was coming to get me for the weekend. The story I was told, I've been told so many stories, but my grandmother told me this story, and that's the one that I believe.
What age was this? Like you were like 2,
I was
3?
like 18 months.
Oh, gotcha.
My leg was broken. I used to have a limp because I was never taken to the doctor or nothing, the dentist, nothing. She had moved out of the apartment, and my dad went to pick me up, and the manager of the apartment said that she had left. Mm-hmm. My grandmother said that she had a dream that I was still in the apartment. So she made my dad go back to the apartment. And my dad said she wasn't in the apartment. My grandmother had a dream again. My father's cousin was a police officer in that county, in the county that this apartment was in. So she said, I'm telling you, Tracy's in that apartment because I'm dreaming about her. And she's in a closet in the apartment. And I was in the closet in the apartment.
Wow. Your grandmother was saying this?
Yeah, to my dad.
Wow.
That's the story that my grandmother told me.
Wow.
And so they found me, and I was dragging my leg, and, you know, I don't know. I don't know. I don't, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know.
It was too early for you to have recollection of
Yeah,
it.
I don't know. I don't know nothing. I mean, my father, I couldn't talk about my mother. I couldn't ask anything. My dad hated her. He called her a whore and all this other shit. But when my grandmother died, nobody wanted me to go to the funeral. I had called my family because I got word that my grandmother passed. They didn't want me to come because the whole issue with my family, one thing was the abuse and lying to me, and then my mother and lying about that, my stepmother. But I had a child with a black man. Mm-hmm. So that was, you know.
Yeah, I read it in your story, yeah.
So when my grandmother died, she lived in Pennsylvania, and we're all here. So they were like, no, you don't need to come to the funeral, because they didn't want me to bring my daughter. But I wouldn't have brought my daughter in a situation like that. Mm-hmm. But there was no way I was not going to go to my grandmother's funeral. And I didn't need them to help me get there or nothing. So I was 30. And they were pissed when I walked in. But I wasn't afraid of my father anymore. My daughter was 12 years old.
So you were like in your 30s?
I was 30.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And I went to the funeral, and the wake the night before is when I showed up. And the town in Pennsylvania that we're from is called Avoca. Mm-hmm. And my family name, my great-grandparents came from Ireland. Mm-hmm. So we have hundreds and hundreds of cousins and people. The whole town of Avoca is pretty much related to us. Mm-hmm. Anyway.
Gotcha.
So when I went to the wake, these people hadn't seen me since my father picked me up, you know, in the middle of school and took me away. So I just disappeared again. So they hadn't seen me in 30 years. And when I walked in, I was so scared because, I was by myself, and, you know, it's intimidating. And I heard somebody say, oh my God, that's Tracy. And I turned around, all these people, like, that, you know, loved me, and, like, these were my cousins and fourth cousins, and, you know, all these people in Pennsylvania that knew me when I was a little kid that I hadn't seen in years. And then in the next room was where Rita, the body was, and my dad and the immediate family was. Mm-hmm. So when my dad saw me come in, he just turned white. I mean, he didn't expect me to show up. Mm-hmm. So we went to the funeral, and then we went back to my grandmother's house, and we were going through pictures and stuff. And so I said, I'm going to say something to my dad. You know, I'm going to confront my dad. So I was getting ready to leave, and my dad, you know, he was trying so hard to avoid even looking at me. And I said, I need to talk to you for a second. So I took him in the other room, and so I tried to talk to him like, why can't you just be honest? And, you know, I mean, why do you hate me? Like, I was just a little kid, and you were a firefighter. Like, you were saving people, and you were a hero. But, you know, you wouldn't save me. Like, and my father said, oh, because when you were 14, you did, you know, blah, blah, blah. And right then, I just knew, like, because my father also had a daughter with my stepmother, and he didn't have a relationship with her either. He didn't want to be bothered. You know, like, I don't know. I really don't know my father to know what his problem was. I don't know if he felt like my mother betrayed him in some way, or maybe he was trying to save her by knowing how she grew up and providing for her, and it didn't work out, and so it made him feel a certain way. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I just knew at that moment that I wasn't going to get whatever it was I was looking for from him, and I had to be okay with that. And I was, He didn't intimidate. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. He looked really pitiful to me because he was missing out on so much. You know, you have a grandchild that's, you know, this beautiful child that you know, you have nothing. You know, I don't know. It just kind of resolved it for me with my dad. And I knew I would never see him again. And I was okay with that because I didn't, you know, my family, you know, they were very racist. And I couldn't understand how my father was a DC firefighter but hated black people so much. Like, I couldn't.
Yeah, that's Chocolate City.
I mean, I couldn't. That's the kind of that's what I'm saying. It was so confusing for me. You love me, but you're beating me. You don't like black people, but you're risking your life to save them. Like
it's all perplexing.
It's just really confusing.
Yeah.
But and that will really mess a kid's head up. But
did that ever affect your worldview on other races?
No, I never felt right. I never understood why I needed to hate these people. I didn't hate them. I couldn't play with them. Like my next door neighbors, they were two little black girls where I was playing with them in the yard one day. I got the hell beat out of me.
Wow.
I mean, I didn't hate them. I never said the N-word. It never sounded right. Even when I was a kid, it just didn't sound right to me. I didn't know why I didn't like it. So when my daughter's father took me into their house and his family just, you know, enveloped me with all this family love. And these are the people I'm supposed to hate. But it's the people that are supposed to be my family that are treating me so awful.
Tracy, where is she now? And I don't just mean like materially, physically. I'm talking about like
in
mentally.
My mind.
Yeah.
So I'm worried about my future because I'm too old to have a career. But I have a grandson. And that's what I focus on now because so like I'm trying to get my driver's license together. I went on last night I talked to this guy. This company is really wanting me to work for them, which is a great feeling. Because what I had done when I went home, I stayed in the house for a year and I just wrote and journaled and prayed and tried to center myself and tried to see where was my life going to be because all I ever wanted was a family. And I've always wanted to be married and just be with somebody and be happy. And but I wasn't ready for all that because of what I needed to end this relationship that I thought was going to be forever. I know that I enjoy being a wife. Like I'm a really good cook. I'm an artist. I write poetry. I write little stories. I paint. I make jewelry. I do nails. I do anything, any kind of art. Sometimes I just color with coloring pencils and draw, and it brings me so much contentment to be able. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't if things weren't. If the water wasn't rocky, I wasn't happy. I couldn't just be sitting down and be settled. And I'm so blessed that I'm not where I want to be because I'm back with my daughter's father's family, and he's still there, and he's even crazier. But he doesn't. We don't. There's none of that between us now. We know how to stay out of each other's way. We might have a little argument every once in a while, but he knows. He tried to cross that line with me, but he already knows. I'm not even playing that.
Yeah.
I'm not the one. I'll have you so far in the system you won't even find your butthole. So he knows not to play with me.
Yeah. So he doesn't try to like.
No, nothing. Doesn't
Okay.
argue with me. He's not in my none of that. And
All right,
and it's
all right.
okay. Like we know, we know each other's moods. We know to leave each other alone. We, and then we know when we can be around each other and go to the store and go, go hang out, go fishing. Like we can be around each other now, but that's not where I want to be. I needed to center myself. And I stayed home for about a year, and then I started working. so I hadn't worked in a long time. So I got a job, and I stayed there for about 5 months. And when I saw how I behaved in that job, I mean, I just was so crazy because I didn't know what I wanted to be, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I was frustrated, and I didn't like the job that I had, and I wanted this other job, and I was just crazy. So I quit. And and so I do like little jobs just to make it through to survive. But so now I'm ready to go back to work, and I want like so what I do is I work for like general contractors and small business. That's what my specialty is, like small business construction, and I run like a project manager. I run the projects, keep up with the paperwork and submittals and change orders and stuff like that. Work with foremen on the job sites and stuff like that, and I really like that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So I'm getting ready to start this job after the Christmas, and I think I'm ready to go on my own. I want to. I'm not yet. Like I want to start working, and I got to put some money away, and I had a bunch of fines and tickets for my driver's license, so I worked all summer a friend of mine lives at the beach in Rehoboth, so I went to the beach for the summer and made a bunch of money so I could pay off all these fines, and I did it, and I'm so proud of myself. So I'm trying to get my license together, get a car, and then, get out of that house and be a grown-up. But I'm worried because, okay, I'm not going to cry. I feel like, I didn't know that I was a decent looking girl. I didn't know that. Nobody ever told me that until I was old. And I feel like I'm a little scared that I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life. And I don't want to be alone. But I don't want the bullshit. I don't want any baby mama drama. I don't want, and I think in my age now, I think I could meet someone that's around my age, and I would hope that they, I just want to be content. Like I don't want, I'm not a materialistic person. I don't give a shit about diamonds or big houses. I don't care nothing about that. I just want a little place where maybe I can, rescue a dog, or, I want to do good in the world, because I did a lot of bad. Not bad, but I was around a lot of bad things, and I've never hurt anybody. I was always good to people, and I had a wonderful journey in my life. I mean, there were parts of it that were awful, but I've had a good life, and really quick, it's funny because when I was in prison, I said to this girl, there was a girl in there, and what she had done is she had an affair with this married guy, and the married guy tried to end the affair because his wife was pregnant. So what she did is, the wife was 9 months pregnant. She killed the wife and cut the baby out of this woman, and put the baby in the dumpster. This was in Montgomery County. So she was facing 2 life sentences. And she was in the cell next to me. And every day we went to that fucking library, she would get these books on the islands and Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico and all these travel books. And I was like, why do you do that? You're never getting out. Like, you know how heinous you are? You know what you did? And she said, well, that's because you don't believe in God. I said, God don't love me. God, I've been cursed my whole life. And she said, that's the problem. If you sat and told yourself your life story and took out all the, just by chance and by luck and it just so happened to be, and you put God in those situations, you'll see how God carried you. And God was with you the whole time. She was the one that showed me that God was carrying me my whole life and protecting me my whole life. Mm-hmm. And I never forgot that girl, because I always believed that I was cursed from the day I was born. And when I looked at my life and saw how many times, I should have been in prison for 24 years, 27 years. And like that judge, I don't know how you're not in prison. She was going through my record and looking at me and like shaking her head. And I don't know how you are not in prison. I don't know. She and was pissed that I wasn't in jail. When I started looking at my life in that way, I could see God all around me. I was raised a Catholic, but I was, according to the Catholics, I was already condemned to hell because I had a child out of wedlock. I had a child with a black man. I left my father, I dishonored my father. I had done all these things that, I was already, God wasn't, I was raised to believe God was punishing. You had to confess your sins. Then you had to say so many Our Fathers and Hail Marys and ask for forgiveness and all this other shit. Then when I had my daughter and Grandma took her to a Baptist church, and I started seeing that I didn't hear anything about being punished by, none of that was being taught in a Baptist church. That's when I went to the pastor and I said, I'm Catholic, but I don't want to be Catholic. I don't believe in that. I believe that they're teaching me that God's punishing me and watching me and my sins, and He sees all your sins and and all this other stuff, and that's not the relationship that I want. And so I was baptized again as a Baptist. Now, I'm not a church person. It's more about the spirituality of it for me. I know that when I reached out and said, I cannot do this and I'm going to die, that my prayers were answered. It might not be the situation. See, if I was comfortable where I was, then I wouldn't change. We only change when we're uncomfortable, when something's wrong. Somebody told me one time, there's a reason that you meet people. There's only 2 reasons that you meet people: for them to learn from you or for you to learn from them. That's why people come in and out of your life. Sometimes they're there for a season. Sometimes they're there for decades. And I can remember every instance of the last time I saw somebody before they died, and how, I got that one last glimpse or that one last hug, or, I've had friends commit suicide. I've had friends OD. I've had friends die right there on my fucking floor. But I know that I have been so blessed, and I'm so grateful that I went to rehab 500 whatever times, that I just kept going back, because I don't know where that answer came from, that means I have hope, because that was the last time I went. Knock on wood, that I knew. When I looked in the mirror that day, I think I was 21 days in that rehab, and I said, nobody would have went through that for me, except for me. So it just hit me like a rock that I loved me. And I was okay with that. That filled me enough. That all this other love that I was looking for, it could be there, but it's not all encompassing.
Right.
That what I had was already inside of me. I just wish I hadn't had to struggle so long to find it and to know that. Mm-hmm. And when you're a kid, especially a girl who doesn't have a mother, and you don't know what a period is, and you don't know nothing about sex, and your father's calling you a whore, and you don't even know what a whore is. I mean, I didn't even know what that word was. But I knew I didn't want to be that because my dad didn't like it. I idolized my dad. But he just, I couldn't fulfill him. But I don't see that anymore as a negative for me. That's whatever he went through in his life. And maybe his mother made him feel so, like there's so many dynamics to why people are who they are.
Right.
But one thing I know is that when people show you who they are, believe them, because that's who they are. People will change, but that's who they are. If they betray you, they're going to betray you again. Now, I'm not saying cheating or something like that, but when someone shows you who they are, mm-hmm. you better open your eyes and see it. Because my grandmother told me one time, don't ask questions you don't want the answer to, because that answer can change your whole world, and you better be ready for that. And so I never asked those questions. I never looked at my relationship of 20-some years because I only saw what I wanted to see. I wanted it to be what I thought it was, but it was never like that. It was all in my head. He didn't love me the way I loved him, and it's okay. I don't have any regrets. I'm not angry about it. He's the one that has all this resentment and anger and, what uncomfortable. I don't know what his problem is, but I don't have that feeling because I had a good life. It wasn't all good. We had bad times, but, I had a good life with him. And I have good memories. And I had met some really great people, and I've traveled and I've done things that I would have never done had I not been with him. If I'd have stayed with stupid, my daughter's father, I'd have still been sitting in that house all these years. He says he hasn't done anything ever with his life, never been anywhere.
Wow.
And man.
Yeah.
So, I just wish that I wish I would have known what I know now. But, I guess that's all of us in life. I guess that's what the whole purpose of living a life is. But,
yeah.
Where I am now, I just want to be okay trusting Tracy, because that's always been a little roll of the dice for me, because I can really fuck things up. But, I have a grandson who just sees no wrong in me. He's never seen me as a bad person. He's never seen me in jail. He doesn't know, that I was on drugs. He doesn't know that part of me. He just sees me as Gigi, and I'm perfect to him. And I don't want to disappoint him, because I disappointed my daughter. My daughter has got a master's degree. She's always been very independent, but she has issues with me because even though I did the right thing by not bringing her along on my horrendous journey in life, because I couldn't imagine doing that to her. I loved her too much, and I didn't want to hurt her, and I didn't want to mess her up in the head. But I guess I did traumatize her in some way, and we're not at a place where we're ready to deal with that yet. And it really hurts me. But, when we're both ready, I think for my daughter, she's like, okay, it's time for you to do something now, because you've been there 3 years. Like, it's time to do something, and so do it, and that's okay. It is time for me, I just needed to be able to count on Tracy, and And man, I'm just so grateful that I'm so grateful that I went to that rehab. And I did it for Robin because I did it for me. I did it for a lot of things, but I didn't want to die. I didn't want to die like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And the only thing I'm grateful for is that she didn't die in an alley. And she didn't die on the street. And she might have messed up. You know, she might have tried it one more time. And it was just too much. But to make me feel better, I just believe that God took her out instead of letting her lose everything again.
Yeah.
And being back out there again.
Yeah.
Because she was such a good person. And I reached out to her daughter many times because her daughter blamed me for a long time. But, you know, our children were the only things that we did right. You know, they were the only things that nobody could take from us. They were the only things that, you know, we didn't fuck up. You know, we did, but they were perfect. You know, that was the only thing that we did right were our children. And I know our children, the children of a drug addict might not see that. It might not feel like their mom or their parent cares for them because they're choosing this lifestyle. It's not like that at all. There's so many layers of why people are the way that they are. Mm-hmm. But, man, I'm so grateful.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that I did not die out there. And I'm so grateful that my life's not over yet. And I have, God, I had so much peace. And that, you know, I love myself. And it's like, God, I don't want to be alone. I want to be in another relationship. But, you know, maybe I'm not ready for that yet. Maybe I just need to wait till that, you know, maybe I need to wait on that a little bit longer. But I'm just so grateful that I made it, that I survived,
yeah.
You know. And I want to do something. I want to do something important now. Like, I want to just have a job, like, you know, to have a place and pay my bills.
Have you thought about becoming like a writer?
Yeah.
Because when you sent me that document, when I read it, and I write outside of doing the production stuff, I'm like, this person sounds like an author.
Man,
like, literally.
You're not going to believe this. In my 3rd grade, we had career day. And me and Ricky Donaldson, my father was a firefighter and his father was a cop. And we had the best career day presentations because our fathers came in uniforms. And so, you know, my dad wasn't an accountant or a plumber. Like, our dads were important. Mm-hmm. And at the end of that week, the lady went around the class and she said, so what do you want to be when you grow up? And I didn't know what I was going to say. I don't know where this came from. The girl behind me said, I'm going to be a lawyer and one day I'm going to sit on the Supreme Court. I was like, God, man, that was good. Like, I don't know what I'm going to be, right? Tracy, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said, one day I'm going to be a world-famous author and I'm going to write books that are going to change people's lives. And I don't know where that came from. So my whole life, I've just been journaling and documenting and been like, yep, this is another part of my story, another part of my story. So by doing this, encourages me to tell my story because there's a lot that I haven't talked about because we'd be here for a week.